Hey everyone, it's Mike. Today I'm going to talk about 5 of my favorite pop-punk bands that never blew up or took over the scene. I'll go over why I like the band, why I think they didn't make it, and I'll give you some song recommendations. Major League came up in the pop-punk revival of the 2010s, and they were there right at the start, releasing their first real impactful EP, The Truth Is, in 2010. And their music, being a pop-punk band with a hint of Easycore, honestly wasn't anything dramatically different than what the other bands were doing in the scene at the time. What put the band on my radar was their 2012 album, Hard Feelings. This is what, in my opinion, separates Major League from other bands in the scene at the time. Now, I'm no music snob, but I remember listening to this album for the first time and thinking that Major League just played better and had more interesting lyrics than the other bands at the time. For the most part, obviously with some exceptions, a lot of pop-punk during the early 2010s was just guys yelling at their ex-girlfriends. And don't get me wrong, Major League had their fair share of breakup songs, but they also expanded their topics and themes dealing with friendship, religion, and broken families. Hard Feelings is pop-punk with a hint of hardcore, and as to why Major League never really made it, that one is easy. Lead singer Nick Trask parted ways with the band. Now, when a lead singer leaves a band, that's always hard to recover from because literally, and I guess symbolically, the lead singer is the voice and face and brand of the band. And adding to that, Major League went from sounding like this to this. The band's next album, There's Nothing Wrong With Me, was released in 2014 with guitarist Brian Joyce now taking over lead vocals. And it's not a bad album, it's just such a departure from the upbeat Hard Feelings that it turned some people away. There's Nothing Wrong With Me is a very dark and serious album, closer to something like Basement or Tiger's Jaw than New Found Glory. It's also interesting to note that Brian Joyce, who sang on There's Nothing Wrong With Me, wrote all the lyrics to Hard Feelings. He just didn't sing on that album, but then would later obviously take on vocal duties. I really put the issue with Major League not breaking out more into the pop-punk scene, into the top of the pop-punk scene, as to more with their really dramatic change in sound than their change in lead singer. I think if they would have kept that Hard Feelings style and vibe and sound with their next album, I think they would have kind of, for the most part, kept that same momentum, but you had the change in lead singer and the dramatic change in sound. That 1-2 punch, in my opinion, is really what led to the downfall of Major League and just people really not talking about them anymore. Check out Walk Away, 27, my favorite song from the band, Homewrecker. Also check out Pillow Talk, Graves, and Kaleidoscope. Mixtapes were another band that came out of the 2010 pop-punk scene, and the thing that I always loved about Mixtapes was listening to them was the equivalent of sitting around with your friends at 2 a.m., drinking, reminiscing about the past, a lot of personal references, a lot of songs about the scene as a whole as well. Really reminds me of Jeff Rosenstock in Bomb the Music Industry. At the time, I remember a lot of people comparing them to the signature Drive-Thru Records pop-punk sound, but I'd argue Mixtapes has more of a 90s power pop vibe than sounding like Alistair or New Found Glory, for example. Again, what I loved about Mixtapes was their storytelling in their songs, and the lyrics that felt like you were just sitting around with your friends on a back porch somewhere, talking about life, love, and the universe. They also showcased dual vocals, which really helped separate them from the crowded scene. One of my favorite releases from the band is their acoustic album, How to Throw a Successful Party, with songs matched up with hours during the day. It's a really fun and unique album from the band. One of the reasons I think Mixtapes didn't have more of a lasting impact on the scene is because a lot of their songs could fit almost anywhere in their entire discography. Songs from their first album could be on their last and vice versa, and that's not a bad thing necessarily. I mean, obviously I love Mixtapes. I'm here talking about them years after they broke up, and I love all of their albums, but I could see people pointing to that as a reason for not really coming back to the band. The band broke up in 2014, citing personal issues. Lead singer Ryan Rockwell went on to form rap/pop group Massive Nights, and lead singer Maura Weaver went on to form Boys, recently joined Direct Hit, and my personal favorite, Ogie Kubo Station. I've always enjoyed Maura Weaver's voice, from obviously her time with Mixtapes to Masked Intruder. I'm really interested to see what happens with her voice on Direct Hit and the more intense songs that they have. That's going to be really fun. And also with Ogie Kubo Station again. If you're not listening to that band, you're missing out on some of the best punk rock in the scene right now. As far as Mixtapes and what you should check out from the band, honestly, just go on Spotify or Apple Music and hit shuffle and, see what comes up and listen to that. It's all good stuff. As far as an album, I would check out Even on the Worst Nights, and as far as songs, Mount Hope, 5 a.m., and I'm Wearing the Device. Close your eyes with me for a second and just think of what 2000s pop punk sounds like. Just close your eyes, have your mind going there. Think of the sound of 2000s pop punk. That is Knockout.
What can I say? Do it anyway. You're always on the run. Why don't you stay? Talk this through.
Starting out in the early 2000s, Knockout represents that fast-paced, upbeat pop punk like Rufio and Alistair, a band that would have worked perfectly on the American Pie soundtrack or really any other coming-of-age party movie in the 2000s. Songs about love, leaving town, getting older, telling someone you're sorry. Is it anything revolutionary? No, but as far as bands from that time, the punk is pop, the music is catchy, and Knockout is a band that no one ever talks about. What's crazy is that the band's second album, Searching for Solid Ground, was released on Fearless Records, one of the biggest labels in the scene, and still, when you talk to people about Knockout, it's crickets. Now, I know that everyone doesn't love the more whiny sound of pop punk with, Rufio, Alistair, and some of the New Found Glory songs, but if you really like that fast-paced, upbeat 2000s pop punk, you're gonna love Knockout. Searching for Solid Ground is the band's only album on Spotify, so check out Hideaway, Breakout, Regretta, and Leaving Chicago. Being compared to Hot Water Music and Lifetime, Polar Bear Club came onto the scene with intense hardcore songs and plenty of sing-alongs. Polar Bear Club had to really battle for their space in the scene in the 2010s as they didn't really fit in with the other pop-punk bands at the time. They were way more menzingers than they were The Story So Far. And that's what made me a fan. I was listening to a lot of pop punk during that time, and then when I heard Most Miserable Life or Living Saints, it was so different from what I was listening to that I was hooked. When you talk about Polar Bear Club, you have to talk about Death Chorus. What would become the band's last album is also the most divisive among fans. And that's because lead singer Jimmy Stat's voice changed. From a post on Tumblr, he described the change, saying in short that he felt his voice was getting more and more strained, so he went to a throat specialist, but the doctor couldn't find anything wrong. So going into the recording for Death Chorus, he sang in a way that felt comfortable, which resulted in a more clean style. Now obviously I'm a Polar Bear Club fan. I like the old stuff and I like the new stuff. In my opinion, Death Chorus just gets way too much hate from what I've seen online. The voice change was something completely out of their control, so it's very hard to criticize the band for it, especially since it's not like they went and made a mainstream pop record. It's still a rock/pop rock, pop punk, whatever you want to call it, record. Sure, it doesn't sound as intense as some of the old stuff, but again, it was something that was completely out of their control. And not to mention, the band could have saw what was happening with Jimmy's voice and just not made another album, but they did it for the fans. So it's really hard to criticize the band for giving fans new music. Check out Graph Paper Glory Days, Most Miserable Life, Living Saints, and Hollow Place. Every Avenue is more on the pop side of things, on the pop-punk spectrum. Think of bands like All Time Low, Forever the Sickest Kids, or The Maine. I remember listening to the band for the first time, and I was their target audience. I was in high school. I was, consumed with what my crush thought about me. I was heartbroken. I was partying with friends. Every Avenue is a soundtrack to love and heartache. And what I always thought the band did so well was that they grew up with their audience. Every Avenue went from singing about being young and in love and partying to talking about marriage and singing about how relationships get harder as you age. A lot of people think pop punk is this thing that you only listen to when you're a teenager or when you're in your 20s, but I think you can look at Every Avenue as a good example of how pop punk should mature. I think that's the reason why Jimmy Eat World, Yellow Card, and Paramore have kept people engaged this long. Now look, Every Avenue isn't on the same level as those other bands, otherwise they wouldn't be on this list. But if you look at their Spotify numbers, they do better than a lot of current bands that people talk about as being on top of the current scene. And when they reunite to play shows here in Chicago, they draw. My favorite songs from the band are Tell Me I'm a Wreck, I Forgive You, and A Story to Tell Your Friends. There you have it, 5 bands that should have been bigger. Let me know what you thought about all the bands in the comments down below, and also let me know what bands you think should have been bigger. Also, don't forget to check out the Spotify playlist linked down below with all the music I talked about. Please like and share the video, subscribe if you haven't, tell all your friends, follow me on Twitter, and thanks for watching.